31 years of tireless efforts. 45,464 scholarships awarded. Construction and renovation of 233 schools, providing 25,683 free vocational and skills training courses. 12,244 children with disabilities supported.
Cái khao khát về cái việc học của mình nó rất là cháy bỏng, thì cái sự giúp đỡ của Saigon Children đến rất là kịp thời.
Thời điểm đó mà không có Saigon Children thì mình nghĩ là mình sẽ không có được như ngày hôm nay.
An organization that operates to giving disadvantaged Vietnamese children a brighter future. This is Saigon Children's Charity, SCC.
And those impressive feats are the achievements of Saigon Children's Charity, a non-government organization that have been working for 31 years tirelessly to help children realize their full potential to their well-tailored educational programs. And today, it is our honor to have Mr. Damien Roberts, the CEO of Saigon's Children's Charity, coming over to Talk Vietnam to share his story. Thank you so much for attending Talk Vietnam today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
This year, 2023, marks a very important time for Saigon Children's Charity, which is your 30th anniversary of your first operation, a school in Cần Giờ, right? But your story dates back to 1992. That was when, Vietnam was started to integrate internationally, and the socio-economic situation in Vietnam was not at its best state. Why did the charity decide to choose the southern part of Vietnam as its main operation? Why specifically there?
The founder of the charity was a teacher back in the United Kingdom. And because he taught geography, he was taking his students on a field trip. And because they had the money to do so, they were determined to come to Vietnam, which was, as you say, opening up around that time. So it's a very interesting place for them to explore. The founder of the charity, the teacher, Paul, he came to Vietnam, and he could also see that there was a huge determination, as you said, to open up and to develop quickly, and that children were at the center of that. And he knew that as a teacher and as somebody who had, through his job, access to lots of potentially powerful donors, that he could utilize his network and his focus on education to help children here in Vietnam. And so that was what he determined to do back in '92.
Wow. And 1992 is a difficult time for Vietnam as well, so I would imagine that the charity did encounter many difficulties. And so why did the charity decide to base their operation in the Mekong Delta regions?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the challenges they faced back in those days, there was first the issue of, the charity didn't exist. So it had no reputation, it had no track record, and it had no donors. And so from that side of things, there was absolutely the need for the founder to go out and to tell the story of what he'd seen in Vietnam and what he believed it would be possible to do here. But as you say, 31 years ago, the government, for example, didn't have as many resources focused on supporting organizations like ours. Nowadays, there's plenty of support to help international NGOs and other charity groups to do their work. But of course, back then there wasn't. So it was really important for the charity at that stage to kind of build relationships with individuals in the areas that they wanted to work. Initially, the first trip that they did at that time was to Ho Chi Minh City and to the Mekong Delta. So obviously it was the first area they were exposed to, and of course that's lasted long in their memories. But I think what was also obvious at that time is that the Mekong Delta had very many people, but not necessarily the best education attainment. I think literacy rates were lower in the Mekong Delta at that time than they were in other parts of the country. And so it just presented a real opportunity, kind of almost on the doorstep of Ho Chi Minh City, for the charity to be able to make a difference. And so, as I say, they kind of started as small as possible, and they quickly tried to scale up into parts of the Mekong Delta.
From the first days of operation, Saigon Children determined that it would take small but steady steps and perform small but practical actions instead of aiming for distant goals. Therefore, the organization's members also personally went to the most disadvantaged localities and met many children to whom they could provide small but long-term help. Since 1992, Saigon Children has focused on 4 key action programs: the Child Development Scholarship Program, the School Building Program, the Getting Ready for Work Program, and the Special Needs Education Program. Running different operations simultaneously effectively puts pressure on an organization of just over 30 employees. However, with determination, SCC strives to ensure that every child reached everywhere they go receives the most sincere care. After 31 years of operation, more than $30 million has been used by Saigon Children to give many generations of disadvantaged Vietnamese children a better life. Thanks to their tireless efforts, Saigon Children was awarded a Certificate of Merit by the Vietnamese Prime Minister, recognizing their contributions to poverty reduction and sustainable development in Vietnam.
And so we were talking about how unique, Saigon's children's charity at the time, which is one of the first entities of its kind to make an appearance, in the charity sphere. So what other unique characteristics does the SCC has that, other regular charities don't have?
Well, I would say everything is a unique quality. I'm not necessarily sure that that's true, but I think for the founder, one of the incredible contrasts was coming from a school which was potentially one of the most famous and richest schools in the world. And then coming to Vietnam and seeing that the situation for many children in parts of Ho Chi Minh City and parts of the Mekong Delta at that time, having seen how little money it would take to make a massive change in so many of these lives, I think that's what encouraged the charity at that time to continue. And it was something which became a powerful story to tell to the supporters, many of whom at that time were in the United Kingdom. The pictures, the stories, it was a real contrast for what many people were expecting. Because we are still, to this day, registered in the UK, everything we do, we have to report very accurately through the UK Charities Commission, which is part of the British government, and everything is audited and published online. One of the joys of this job with Saigon Children is that we can give all of our supporters an absolute guarantee that they can track every dollar from their pocket into the lives of the kids that we're helping. And I think that's really important, really powerful for our supporters.
And I feel like the very important note that we can take from here is about over 45,300 scholarships were awarded by the Saigon's Children's Charity to the people. And it's just not a one-time thing either. So how do you decide on which case to support?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's really important because there's always going to be more people who need help than can be helped by us at any one time. And so it's important that we're making sure that the people we're helping and the kids that we're helping are those most in need. What we do is we rely on our partners. So that would be, for example, the women's unions or the boards of education and training at a local level. And they will refer children to us. And so once we have those referrals, we then do a home visit and we interview the child and also their family, whoever that may be at home. That's to find out 2 things. 1, do they need our help? And 2, are they, both child and parent or carer, focused on education for that child for the long term? And if the answer to those 2 questions is yes, then we will do everything we can in order to find a way to support them for years afterward. When we first headed out to meet with some of the potential recipients of our scholarships, I remember just driving out to a kind of a rural southern part of Ho Chi Minh City, not a million miles away from where I've been living and working for years. I saw, some really impressive looking houses, 4 stories high, beautiful, gleaming white. And I thought, well, that's good. Some people here are doing okay. So I asked my team and they said, oh, no. The big concrete buildings, those are for the birds. That's where they harvest birds' nests. And actually, one of the children that we were visiting that day, they lived in a house next to one of these birds' nest farms. And their house was made of bamboo and leaves. And it was just the most striking thing to see. The birds were living in a concrete house. The humans were living in a house that looked like it was a bird's nest. When we went into the house, there was almost nothing inside of any real value, just some fairly damaged furniture, no proper floor. The little girl who lived in the house with her mother, she had completed, I think at that stage, 7 years of school. And tucked behind the bamboo pole that held up one of the walls was the laminated certificates that she got every time she finished a year of her education that she got from her school. And I thought, wow, this is the thing of greatest value in this house to this family. And to be in the incredible position to be able to say, yes, we're going to give you that opportunity. We're going to build on your hope. We're going to try to give you that future. Is just, it's something that stayed with me until today.
Have you been catching up with that girl at all? How has she been doing now?
So still in our program, still doing well. And we don't base our scholarships on their academic performance. So as long as they are attending and working hard and passing the year, then we'll continue to support them. We're not choosing the best and brightest. We're choosing those with the greatest need and the greatest passion for continuing to learn. And so we currently have close to 2,000, regular reports which will be coming in from those children. And you're right, it's absolutely amazing to see those kind of children's stories developing as you would hope they would. And so far so good.
Mỹ Linh is a kindergarten teacher in Cần Giờ district, Ho Chi Minh City. Before becoming one of the first low-income students to receive a scholarship from Saigon Children 27 years ago, her only dream was simple, a peaceful life and a stable job.
Từ nhỏ là mình không có sống với ba, thì chị hai cũng nghỉ học, đi làm với mẹ. Cái dấu mốc mà nhận được cái học bổng nó đối với gia đình nó rất là quan trọng.
Like Mỹ Linh, Chi Tai was among the first students to receive help from Saigon Children. He is a police officer now.
Từ năm lớp 2 thì tới hết cấp 3 thì Saigon Children đã hỗ trợ những cái phần quà, học bổng, sách vở để mình tiếp tục đi học. Rất là hãnh diện là được sự hỗ trợ, sự đóng góp để mà tiếp bước cái con đường đại học của mình.
These are just two examples of the tens of thousands of disadvantaged students whose educational dreams have been fulfilled by Saigon Children over the years. Many continue to be part of the alum network and work to help more children and teenagers get the help they need. Each year, Saigon Children provides nearly 2,000 scholarships to children and young people ranging from elementary school to college to ensure they have the opportunity to continue their education and develop their full potential.
Gia đình em thì có 7 thành viên. Trước khi gặp Saigon Children thì nhà em khó khăn lắm. Tại lúc đó một mình chị hai mà phải nuôi hết 5 chị em đi học. Saigon Children thì lúc nào cũng sẵn sàng hỗ trợ. Lúc mà em không có tiền cắt kính hay là máy tính, xe đạp, đồ này kia thì cũng hỗ trợ.
The support can be for essential needs such as tuition, books, uniforms, and food, but it can be social care to remove their low self-esteem. With his support, SCC has been helping countless Vietnamese children overcome invisible barriers to break the cycle of poverty.
There must be a lot of successful stories that have come out. Do you remember any stories of the children who you have helped that have their entire life course changed because of the support?
Possibly one of the greatest elements of my job is that I'm sometimes introduced to someone and then they say, oh, actually, I was supported by your charity, or I was at a school groundbreaking ceremony last week and there was a young woman there. She worked for a big US multinational engineering firm. They were sponsoring at first a school and also a lot of other activity that we're going to be doing. And she came over and she said, I was in your scholarships program. And so from, I think, year 8, when she would have been around, I think, 13 years old, 12, 13, until she graduated from university, she received our support. She was now working for this incredible company. They had sent her along to be one of the 3 representatives of the organization at this event. And she came up and spoke in absolutely perfect English to kind of thank me for the support of the charity over the years. And of course, that's wonderful. But, there I was thanking her for being a donor who's now helping to pay for a school, which is going to create, you know, a generation of children in that area who are now going to have access to a safe and beautiful building. And those kind of stories are just, you know, they're mind-blowing, really. And I think that journey for us is just really incredible to see. And it's something that we see not just in those who have gone through our programs and then got a job and then are able to help, but actually we see it in those who have just left our programs too. One of my earliest memories at the charity was, you know, walking out for lunch. And in the little park where we put our bike, one of my staff was talking to two young women. They are 18 years old, I think, 19 years old. And they had been supported by us, and they had come back 1 month after they left our scholarship program. And the reason was that they had received their first salary, and they wanted to come back and give us 10%, which was about $10. Because, and I stopped and I was introduced to them, and I, you know, asked why they were doing this, and they just said, well, we're so grateful for the opportunities that we had, and we want to make sure that other children like us have them. It was, yeah, I think it was one of the first times I thought, this is a pretty incredible job.
I think what beautifully captures about charity works is this, you know, the spirit of paying it forward, right? Through that, the kindness and the charity kind of multiplies in effectiveness. But alternatively, have you ever encountered any cases that Saigon's children charities kind of fall short on helping those children kind of develop fully? What was the reason behind it?
You know, this is kind of the hardest part of the work that we all do, is that you try to help every child you can, and sometimes you can't help them, and sometimes you can help them, but only for a certain period of time, and then either their problems become too complex, or their level of, you know, disadvantage within the family changes, and they just are no longer in a position where, even with our support, even if we increased our support, they would be able to stay in education. You know, many of them, they have to get a job because they have to bring in some money because of the debt or the need for medicine for a family member. And those stories, thank goodness, are only a tiny percentage each year. And in fact, I think it's a number that we're trying every year to make smaller and smaller, but I've had to accept that it will never be zero. You know, there was a story really recently. One of the girls we'd been supporting for a long time, I think close to 10 years. And she had to take on part-time work in a factory with her mother. She was still hoping to go to university. We were hoping to be able to make that possible. And unfortunately, during one of the times that she was commuting to work, she was hit by a car and she died almost immediately. And it was an unfortunate accident. And because she had to work, because she needed to help bring in some money for the family, you know, she just happened to be in that place that day. And yeah, those kind of stories are the ones that unfortunately they also stick with you. There's always going to be some of those cases, those children who fall through the net for some reason. There's always going to be a few that it's impossible to help completely. But the number of children who start our program and finish the program is thankfully very high because of the level of support that they get from our social workers over time.
Across Vietnam, it is difficult to estimate how many children's schools are still in this situation. Old, lacking equipment and sanitary conditions, and even dangerous.
Con thấy trường mình hơi bị cũ, tường không có được đẹp cho lắm. Nhà vệ sinh của trường rất là cũ, với là hôi. Con thích trường mới là tường sẽ sạch, đẹp.
Saigon Children wants to realize the wishes of these children, which is why this organization has been working tirelessly to provide children with classrooms like this.
Với cái trường mới như thế này thì tập thể cán bộ và giáo viên của nhà trường rất là vui mừng. Các em học sinh cũng vậy, khi có được một cái ngôi trường khang trang như thế này thì tất cả học sinh rồi phụ huynh rồi háo hức, từ đó thì chỗ nhà trường sẽ làm tốt công tác dạy và học.
This school is the 200th out of 233 schools that Saigon Children has built or renovated over the years. In each location, Saigon Children and numerous volunteers and sponsors labor for hundreds of hours to help dilapidated educational facilities become safer and more pleasant, with proper sanitary conditions and educational equipment. Now, each year, more than 1,500 students in the most disadvantaged areas are guaranteed an environment that makes learning a joy.
And so let's go back to the beginning of the charity's inception. The first project, which is to build a school in Kanze with a mere one classroom, very modest, but it's now sprawled into how many? 233?
I think that sounds about right. Certainly this week, maybe next week it'll be more.
Across all localities. And so what does these locations have in common?
So generally, where we build schools, they tend to be the rural areas and they tend to be more remote areas. There'll be maybe a central school in the kind of the largest town nearby, and then there's satellite schools around. And usually it's those satellite schools that we will be rebuilding. And typically they will be for the earlier years, so kindergartens, primaries. What we want to do is to see a building that's still currently in use, which is badly dilapidated, or it might have a corrugated iron roof and it may not have proper windows. It looks bad, but actually the practical side is when it's raining on a tin roof and you can't hear the teacher, you can't learn effectively. And when you are in a school which is built predominantly on mud or the classroom, then when it's raining, it's very difficult to get around. And so what we do is we build good quality concrete buildings raised high up off the ground above the water, making sure as well, and this is really important, that those schools have a playground and that the kids want to be there. And I think that's been one of the things which I've loved the most, is when I go along and I'm opening a new school, for many of these kids, they think it's the best building in their area. They want to be there because it's fun. That's where their friends are and that's where they can play. If you can kind of build into those kids that mindset that school's a great place to be, then it just encourages them to learn even more. And it's just a wonderful thing to be able to do that in those rural areas. And so, I absolutely love that. So long may that continue to be part of our work.
I feel like that is the ideal situation or the ideal learning environment for a lot of other kids across the country as well. And Saigon's Children's Charity has expanded operation to the central and the northern region as well. And so, have you ever considered a name change?
It's probably not the best name, but we're attached to it for historic reasons. But hey, listen, if anybody watching this has some good suggestions, I'll be very happy to hear them.
Yeah.
We'd been working in a few parts of the country very intensively for a long time. As we learned more as an organization about Vietnam and the communities and those in need, we could see that there was a clear need in other parts of the country. We're getting to the stage where we are able to provide more help. And, our attitude is, if people need help and you can help, why wouldn't you help? And so that was just a natural progression that we started doing more activity in the central region and also activity in the kind of the northern parts of the country. And we actually have, if you walk up the stairs of our office, and it's not a very glamorous office, but you walk up the stairs and on the wall is a huge kind of wooden map of Vietnam. And coloured in Saigon Children's blue are all of the provinces in which we've worked. And it's a wonderful thing to see so many of those provinces in blue. I would love for them all to be blue. I'm not sure I'll be working long enough to get that done, but it's possible.
Well, and we would certainly looking forward to having more schools being built in rural areas where children are needed. And so do you have any special stories that you've collected throughout the years?
One of my fondest memories is we went to open a school. So I went, a couple of my team members went, and we took two of our most important donors, a man and a woman, both in their 70s. They had contributed so much, and I hadn't realized that the last kilometre of the journey to the school, because it was in such a remote location, couldn't be done in a car, had to be done on a motorbike. And so I had to go to these donors who I don't think had been on a motorbike in very many years and explain, we can't reach the school, we can't reach the school. And they both said, no problem. And so they hopped up on the back of the motorbikes driven by my team, and they sailed through these tiny, thin, narrow jungle paths for more than a kilometre to get to the school. Because as far as they were concerned, this is a small inconvenience compared to, the kids who are here and their way out of here or their way to a better life is through education, and it will happen in the school that we built for them. And so, yeah, it's great because those kind of situations, they push people out of their comfort zone. They make them think again. If I'd gone to those same two people in the middle of Ho Chi Minh City and said, oh, let's travel by motorbike, it may have been a different answer. But because of the children and because of the work we're doing, it made it a totally different situation. It's very memorable.
We're talking about, children's most basics of needs. And so building schools is one thing. But does the Saigon Children's Charity have any bigger overall projects that help address the lack for these children to access the most basic rights to be educated?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our model is, we remove barriers to education. We look for whatever barriers those might be. One of the things that we saw over recent years is that more and more children are having access to computers and to smartphones and to laptops and online learning. Those children that don't have access to a smartphone, who don't have access to reliable 4G, they are the ones who are now missing out on learning and will be missing out on learning in the future if they continue to be unable to access that. So part of what we've been doing has been around, enabling digital access. And also for those kids who are in schools and areas where we've built computer rooms, for example, they need to know how to use the internet, not just to find incredibly useful information and exciting knowledge, but also to stay safe. And so that's another big part of what we're trying to do is online safety. And so that's something we've been doing with many thousands of children because, you're kind of looking ahead and you're saying, well, how are your educational lives going to change over time anyway, and how can we make sure that the help we're giving those kids is helping them learn but keeping them safe as well.
Education is one of the best ways to help disadvantaged children escape poverty, but sometimes helping children access knowledge in school is not enough or unsuitable for special circumstances. Thăng Long English and Vocational School is sponsored and established by the Saigon Children's Charity to provide short-term vocational and skills courses suitable to the abilities, interests, and circumstances of young adults aged 16 to 25. Since 1994, nearly 26,000 students have participated in such free courses.
Em tên là Nguyễn Thị Kim Ngân, quê em ở Nhà Bè, thành phố Hồ Chí Minh. Em học ở SAIC và em học ở đó được 6 tháng. Nếu mà so với cuộc sống em trước khi em gặp SAIC thì em cảm thấy bây giờ em hạnh phúc hơn và em có thể kiếm được tiền mà chính đôi bàn tay em làm và công sức em làm ra.
In addition to the necessary foundation skills for future development, students are trained in social psychology and life skills here. But it is more than teaching and learning. There is also connection and sharing to spark self-motivation in students.
Hầu hết tất cả những em vùng ngoại thành, đó là những cái nơi rất là xa trung tâm thành phố, lại là tốt nghiệp loại xuất sắc, vừa ra trường các em chưa cầm cái tấm bằng tốt nghiệp thì các em đã có việc làm. Cái kết quả của các em đã làm cho mình cũng rất là ngạc nhiên và bất ngờ và cũng rất là hạnh phúc bởi vì các em đã nỗ lực bản thân để vượt qua mọi cái khó khăn.
Although each student's level of success in life may be different, under the guidance of dedicated people, most students have overcome their circumstances to become a better version of themselves, confident, independent, skilled, and responsible.
And so you have also worked with adults who are 18 to 25?
Yeah.
Again, not really the children target anymore, right?
We often joke that an organization which is called Saigon Children's Charity, and it doesn't focus only on Saigon, and it doesn't only focus on children, and it doesn't just do traditional charity work, is unexpected for some people when they realize that we're also helping young people as well as children. But that's because many of the children who either we never got the opportunity to help when they were children, or who hadn't heard about us at all, they fell out of education for many reasons, whether it was lack of money or because they had other responsibilities, and maybe it was just what they wanted. But then they become young adults and they realize, actually, I wish I'd taken a different path. And our job is to be able to say to them, you still can. You know, we can give you a different future if that's what you want. And so there was a case not that long ago where a girl left school and became pregnant and was looking to be married. Our social worker, who had been supporting that girl for years, said, okay, that's fine. You know, I've tried to persuade you. I respect your decision. But you've got my number. And, you know, sure enough, sometime later, the girl reached out and said, actually, I'm not happy. I want to try and, you know, go back into some form of education so that I can do better by my child, so that I can support them better in the long term. And so she moved into one of our kind of vocational training programs so that she could build up enough skills to be able to earn more, to provide a better life for her kid. And so we really feel that, you know, helping those young people is really important. And of course, you know, when you're coming from a very disadvantaged background, you may not necessarily have the same awareness as other people of the paths that are open to you. And even if you do, you don't have the means. You don't have the means to stay on that path and to get to where you want to. And I think we do provide the support that kind of wraps around to make sure their welfare is good enough to keep them going, to keep them motivated.
How many people are currently attending the Thăng Long English and vocational schools?
It goes up and down, but it's always above 1,000, and I think currently it's probably around 1,300, something like that. I was there yesterday, actually, so it was the end-of-year closing ceremony for the children and young people who are learning there. There was one young man there who has been coming to that school for the last 5 years. I said, oh, are you okay? Because he looked a bit nervous. And he said, yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm giving a speech. And he was the student who had scored highest on his English exam. I think his result was something like 940 out of 990, which is probably makes him better at English than me. He did an amazing job. He gave the entire speech, first in English, perfectly, and then he gave the same speech again in Vietnamese. And, you know, experiencing those moments where a shy, nervous kid who has no confidence and is keen to try to learn English because they want to kind of aspire to something in the future which is different to anything that anyone in their family has ever achieved is amazing. And he was, without doubt, at his age, he was far better than I was when I was his age.
And so what does the Saigon Children's have done to help these children secure jobs after they have finished vocational training?
Yeah, that's massively important because we would never want to give somebody an incredible education and then just drop them at that point when they've got that, you know, one more big step to take. And so, you know, of course, we have a careers guidance counsellor who works at our little school in Ho Chi Minh City. That's an important part of it. Our social workers also will advise. But the other things which are massively important are that, you know, our donors employ many thousands of people in Vietnam. And what brings them so much joy is when they can take children who become young people, who become young professionals, and they can then incorporate them into their own teams. And often, you know, they become high flyers because they're not only incredibly ambitious and focused, but they've got so much resilience that they built up in their life. So many of our biggest supporters are also helping to take those children on. And what we've noticed is that our alumni, whether they are kind of on the younger side and they're just, you know, supporting other youngsters with things like social activities and life skills, or some of our kind of more mature alumni who are coming back and they're mentors now. You know, by mentoring our children and young people, helping them to understand what the world of work entails and what the requirements are and how to impress and how to put your best side out there for people to see. You know, that's an incredibly powerful part of the work that goes on. And in a way, we have so little to do with that because it isn't about money. It's about this kind of community of people that want to make life better for each other.
After operating for over 3 decades in Vietnam, Saigon Children has left its mark in all areas of its remit. Despite socio-economic fluctuations, The organization's activities are constantly expanding. They have partnered with the government and people of Ho Chi Minh City to deal with the severe consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. They have also undertaken activities focused on eliminating gender stereotypes and building confidence for young girls and women. They have been supporting the parents of autistic children to ensure their children are provided with the necessary development and integration.
Khi tiếp xúc với các em và với những hoàn cảnh khó khăn thì bản thân tôi được truyền thêm sức mạnh và có thêm nhiều nhiệt huyết để làm việc để có thể giúp được cho các em nhiều hơn.
Saigon Children's mission in Vietnam will likely be necessary for a long time. But what they have done in all those years shows one thing: the path they will continue to follow to assist disadvantaged Vietnamese children is always filled with a desire to obtain the best for society.
Yeah, I guess one of the most positive thing that comes out of it is the Saigon's children's commitment to bettering the lives of these children, right? And so I guess now let's talk more about you. You've just recently entered the Saigon Children's Charity and working there since 2018, which is such an interesting time because almost right after COVID-19 hits. And so even though it's only been 5 years, what kind of experience have the Saigon Children's have imparted on you?
Do you know, I think every single day continues to be completely eye-opening. If I think about me, I come from a large, relatively poor family, and my parents both left school when they were, I think, 15 and 16 years old. And so, I grew up in a level of poverty in my country that I thought I'm disadvantaged. And it was only being in this role specifically that I realized how incredibly privileged I've always been. But I didn't appreciate it because I was comparing myself to other people in the UK. And so I always feel humbled by everything I see around me because my team are all experts. Whether they're a social worker or a speech and language therapist or a teacher, they're specialists. So they have these skills I will never have. The fundraising team do magical things and they keep making sure that we're able to keep helping so many kids. So every single one of them is more impressive than me. So I spend all my time thinking, wow, I'm really lucky to have these guys in the team. And so I feel very confident when I'm telling the kids keep learning because I know it's going to keep happening to them whether they like it or not.
Right.
You're right. COVID was just an incredible time. I think it shook the entire world up in a way that I think nobody could have imagined. And of course, when your job is to make sure that those in the most vulnerable positions are able to keep going and keep building and looking ahead to a happier time, it meant that our work was much more intense and much more needed. And of course, every single part of that was really difficult. And so we all learned really fast, what to do and how to change and how to evolve and adapt.
So next year, the year 2024, is going to mark a very important time for Vietnam, which is the 35th anniversary of the United Nations ratifying the conventions on the right of the child, right?
Yeah.
And so Vietnam is one of the 2 countries in the world and in the first country in Asia to ratify these conventions and make it into law. What can we do to better implement these conventions and specifically in accordance to the Prime Minister's No One's Left Behind?
When Vietnam 35 years ago, signed that declaration, that's a very bold move for a country which was just really emerging onto the world stage and still was, waiting to develop in so many ways. The world is transforming around us in terms of digital capabilities, digital education, artificial intelligence. This is, the new internet. This is the new big transformative shift that Vietnam is going to see. And I think by making the most of the opportunities that Vietnam has in terms of making the kids aspire towards those areas and to having the skills that are going to make it possible for them to benefit from this incredible shift that's going to be continuing to happen. I think those are the kinds of ways where Vietnam is going to absolutely be able to make sure that its children become really prosperous people who are able to reach out and help not just their families, but their communities and beyond.
I feel like it really resonates that, in a rapidly changing world, I feel like the work to help support children in disadvantaged situations are always going to be needed. That is a really beautiful note to end on today's interview. And thank you so much for spending the time. We really hope that your work are going to keep expanding in the future until there is no more children in Vietnam is in need of help. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I agree with you. Let's hope we were able to keep helping every child.
And that is all for today's Talk Vietnam. Tune in to our next episode for even more of our amazing guest stories. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye for now.